The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Marketing with Purpose. This is a series of the Bliss Business Podcast where we explore really what it takes for marketing leaders to create impact that goes beyond just the numbers. I'm Mike Liskey, and in each episode, we sit down with real marketing experts to explore their leadership approach and the strategies that really drive performance and, in particular, resonate with their audience. Together, we'll dive really into what's working, what's not, and how purpose and empathy can transform the way brands connect with people. So let's jump in. Today with me I'm being joined by Josh Preiser, who serves as a fractional CMO at Zero Company Performance Marketing. Now, Josh has been a cornerstone of the Zero Company team since 2002, really guiding clients with multi-million-dollar ad budgets towards strategic, sustainable growth. And with deep expertise across Google, Bing, programmatic platforms, including display, video, and CTV, he brings both precision and discipline to building marketing systems that drive real revenue. Beyond technical mastery, Josh is deeply motivated by helping businesses reach their full potential and seeing how that growth positively impacts the people behind them. Now, we're going to really explore today turning marketing into a revenue engine. And so I'm really excited to dive into how strategy and execution and really purpose all come together to create measurable results. So Josh, welcome to our show. We're so happy to have you on with us today.
I'm happy to be here. I'll tell you what, that intro, I'll tell you on down days, I might just fire that thing up and play it just to pump me up. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, an intro that, play it for your mom and I'm sure she'll be super proud. So Josh, before we really dive into all things marketing, I'd love to hear, why was turning marketing into a revenue engine the topic that you chose to explore with us today?
Yeah, I think it's an important topic because I think most companies still treat marketing like a cost center instead of a revenue system. And good marketing shouldn't just be about the dashboards, right? It should be able to prove that it produces a predictable cash flow. And what I see all the time is owners and franchisees who are emotionally exhausted, right? Sometimes they're spending tens of thousands of dollars a month. And they don't know if it's working. They go, well, I'm putting money in and I think we're getting money out, but they can't necessarily connect it. So, again, turning that marketing into a revenue engine is sometimes more than just about not really about dashboards or reports. It's really about giving leaders peace of mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think of the old adage, right? I know 50% of my marketing is working. I just don't know which 50%. But exactly. Even today, that doesn't necessarily have to be true. We have so much data and metrics at our fingertips. Now, with CMOs, they're often really pulled, as you were sort of speaking about, near-term campaign results and showing, revenue, and then kind of the building of that long-term brand. So how do you help to ensure that your marketing strategy really does stay aligned with the growth goals that a company has to hit or that they've set forth, and still be able to maintain that brand building and kind of reduce the amount of friction points that can sometimes happen between those two challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. Friction is real, right? Especially between different departments. And I think most of the friction comes from sometimes when marketing is being measured on activity and the business is being measured on revenue. So it's so important to communicate what are our short-term goals? What are our long-term goals? How are we going to measure results? What are the KPIs that are going to determine what success looks like? Because bottom line is if your customer acquisition cost is below your contribution margin, then growth is good, right? Put your foot on the accelerator, let's go. But if it's flipped, and sometimes that's the case, right? Where people want to grow, but they haven't measured. And then when they do, they realize, wait a second, our customer acquisition cost is above our contribution margin. Well, now that growth is actually destructive, no matter how pretty the ads look. So you have to make sure you're measuring, you have to make sure you're communicating, you have to make sure you're all aligned before you can, again, push on that accelerator and go.
And I'd say too, Josh, as an agency, we've got a lot of experience maybe helping with customers. What would you say to brands or, marketing leaders that may not be at the point of where they have all of these KPIs? Like, how would we maybe perhaps help them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to sit down and, again, figure out what you should be measuring. Because there are many times when someone has approached us and said, okay, well, CPCs are super important to us. We go, well, why? Why is that important? Someone has maybe told them at some point in the past, well, this is the metric that matters. Okay. And maybe that metric is important, but is it the most important metric? Is it our primary KPI? So sitting down and figuring out what truly, if we can measure anything we want, what do we want to measure? And then making sure, okay, now we figured out what to measure. Now, how do we measure that?
And there's so much that can be, done in that regard for sure. Like, not just looking at your cost of acquisition over lifetime value, but maybe even allowing, some loosening of the reins when it comes to cost of acquisition, because doing that could maybe even positively impact your lifetime value by moving you into.
You're exactly right. I'm sorry to interrupt there, but
yeah.
And that actually brings up a separate point I hadn't even thought of. But sometimes we get people that will say, not be totally transparent with the communication, right? And say, well, I want my customer acquisition cost to be $500.
Right.
And let's say it's at $500. And so, we develop a marketing strategy around that, and we're consistently bringing in customers at $475. And we go, that's great. But maybe the powers that be or the C-suite isn't fully transparent in realizing, wait a second, we can actually afford $600. That's night and day. And that's revenue we're leaving on the table. And sometimes they think, well, if I tell my agency that, then they're just going to push it up to $600. A good agency shouldn't. You're right. A bad agency might take advantage of that leeway there, but a good agency shouldn't. A good agency should realize, wait a second, if I can get it under 500, then great. But there's a lot between 5 and 6 that now we've turned off, right? We turned it off because we go, well, that's not profitable, so let's shut it off. But in actuality, maybe it is really profitable.
Yeah, so, exactly right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because lifetime value may be even higher when it comes to those others. So a lot to really take a look at. So maybe you're moving towards talking a little bit more about purpose, and purpose sometimes comes under pressure, and our brand comes under pressure. So in high stakes situations, Josh, I'm really kind of curious. Say maybe a brand crisis or a market downturn. How do you maintain really a sense of purpose and empathy while having to make quick strategic decisions sometimes when a market does start to go south?
Yeah, that's scary, right? And when that revenue is under pressure, most companies will panic and cut the very things that generate recovery. What you want to remember, obviously, is that's an emotional decision, right? That's driven by fear. It's not always a strategic decision. And I always feel like as a fractional CMO, my role is to recognize what's driving with that decision, but then also to empathize with it, right? Because that fear is real. That's not a fake. That's a real emotion that someone is looking at and going, wait a second, I have to scale way back. I can't afford this, et cetera, because there's that fear. And so then once you recognize and acknowledge that fear, then you can more strategically walk through the available paths and the likely outcomes of, okay, well, here's what happens if we take this path. Here's what happens if we take this path. And even more so, I'd say, more specifically even, framing questions using what if or what would you prefer. Give leadership options so then those answers to those questions become more obvious and they can have ownership in the solution, right? So you're giving them questions. You're saying, what if we do this and then this happens? Is that acceptable? Or what if we do this and this happens? Is that acceptable? And then that helps in walking through those scenarios.
Yeah, for sure. That turbulence sometimes makes us very short-sighted. And I'd have to think, as you were talking, I was sort of remembering coming out of the COVID timeframe where a lot of, advertising and marketing budgets were cut, but it was really those that stayed the course that really benefited a great deal coming out of that timeframe.
For
so
sure.
Josh, turning over to maybe launching a new product, right? So we have perhaps a new product coming on board, or maybe we're entering a new market or market segment. I'm curious, what's been sort of the most effective way that you've found to try to get alignment with sales and product and, customer success or customer delivery? And then where does, that alignment sometimes, tend to break down?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it breaks down not always in the messaging, but in the handoff, right? From marketing to sales, or sales to ops, or, ops trying to get reviews and referrals. So you're not aligned on how you're communicating. So when teams aren't aligned on a primary KPI, I want to get everyone aligned on that. What is our goal here? What is our ultimate goal here that we can all agree, this is our purpose, this is what we're moving toward? And I usually feel like once we can agree on that and just simplify, get it down to, here's the goal we're all agreed we're going to push toward, it often helps to make those politics kind of disappear.
Yeah, for sure. And I found too as well that getting alignment, not being afraid of asking the question, who is this product or who is this service for? Because maybe sales might be happy, we get some quick wins, but then delivery or ops is having a total headache delivering on those, right? And so it's so hard to be able to balance that, but at least getting agreement on what those are for. I'm curious now, maybe diving a little bit deeper into strategy. Can you maybe share a time when, say, customer feedback or even some behavioral data was presented where maybe it completely shifted the direction of a campaign? And then, what did that maybe teach you about, balancing intuition along with metrics?
Well, one thing I've learned is that marketing absolutely keeps you humble, because you can think your ideas are the greatest, and then you can test them and determine that they're not. Or vice versa. Someone can come up with an idea and you go, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But no, split test it. Just test it. If it's in line with your branding, if it's in line with, it's not something that you don't like the way it portrays your company, test it, see what happens. I've been surprised more times than I can count. One simple one comes to mind right now. When we're working with franchisees or a local based business, we'll often ask them, hey, what zip codes do you want to focus on? What zip codes do you think are the most profitable for you or the most affluent customers? And we'll push a larger percent of our marketing budget toward that.
Yeah.
And I can think of a client in particular in the home services space. Recently, we discovered that some zip codes that we weren't heavily focusing on were producing 3 times the revenue per lead, even though the cost per lead was higher. So if you just looked at cost per lead, and in this case, cost per lead really was a primary KPI for us. But when we dove deeper, we looked at, well, wait a second. If we just say cost per lead, that's all we care about, that's all we care about. But then we dove deeper and went, wait a second, these zips are producing 3 times the revenue per lead. We can afford a higher cost per lead in those territories, in that those zips. So when we reallocated the budget, the profits went up, even though actually the lead volume dropped, but the profits went up. And so again, that comes back to, right? Start with a hypothesis, then measure the data, make the adjustments and optimize, and then repeat, because you never want to stop iterating. You never want to stop testing. And you want to remember, right? Not all leads are equal. Some might look expensive, but they make you rich. Others might look cheap, but they make you poor.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You got to really test that out, be scientific about it. That's such a good reminder because it's hard. So, next, going back a little bit to this idea of marketing as a revenue engine, I'm really sort of curious about what's worked best for turning marketing into a revenue driver at, say, the organizations that you've worked with on the fractional CMO and VP of marketing side of things. What's really turned that into the revenue driver, and like where do you see that there are perhaps some gaps still in tracking or CRM or even having some alignment?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're talking about a lot of times, if you hire an agency, sometimes that agency is just focused on why I'm driving leads, and what happens from there is not my problem. But from the fractional CMO side, it's important to look at that entire sales funnel, right? Where are the leaks? How come when I look at a franchise system, how come franchise owner A is converting 65% of their leads and franchise owner B is converting 35%? Mm-hmm. I can send franchise owner B more leads, but to what end, right? Yeah. First, we got to close up that leak at the conversion into the sales funnel. And once you're confident in your sales funnel, then you can scale. And that's where it gets fun, right? That's the whole point is, that's what brings me joy at least and gets me up in the morning is when I can prove that adding X into the marketing campaign predictably and consistently generates 5X, 10X, 20X. Hey, start pressing on that accelerator, right? Because that's, I tell our team all the time, it's so that the type of growth that we can help with as marketers can be life-changing, right? For both for owners and founders and for franchisees. So right. If you're a marketer and you do your job well, it's so satisfying because it really changes people's lives. On the other side, you do have that responsibility though, right? Because you do it poorly, it also can have a negative impact. A lot of people have put their life savings into this business that they're trying to grow. So it really is important to kind of take that on as a fractional CMO and realize, hey, I have to take that responsibility, look through that whole sales funnel, figure out the leaks, and then scale.
Yeah. And so, Josh, I know in your experience, you've probably come across companies that would say, hey, I wish I could track, this data, really well. But there's gaps still in their CRM. There's gaps in their conversion or lead tracking, or maybe, as you said, they hand off a lead to sales and then they never hear back. Maybe speak a little bit, to your experience, like, how would you help an organization? Where do you think they should really start?
So you're right. You look at that sales funnel, and for everyone, it's a little different. And you mentioned the CRM. That's a good one. So sometimes you come and you realize, hey, you're right. We can't track because of the way that CRM is built. So it comes back to providing options, and saying, okay, well, so this is a gap for us. We can't see the data. We lose track of it here. So one option is to go with a different CRM, and this would cost this much, and it'll take this much time to get everyone on board, and et cetera. So that's an option, but definitely present that option. And maybe the CEO says, look, I can't afford that. That's not possible right now. We need to grow until we can afford that. Okay, that's fine. But then you present the other option as, okay, well, we can track up to this point in the sales funnel. Well, what do we know about that data? We know that when someone, submits a lead, we do know that X% of those leads, or the leads, end up generating X% of revenue. You work your way backwards from whatever point you can predictably track. Mm-hmm. And hopefully over time, you get to a point where you can go, yes, we can predictably track every step of that sales funnel. But even if you can't, there's always going to be an end point where you go, okay, let's work backwards from here. And then you test that theory and go, okay, well, you never go, all right, we think we've got it. Let's increase the marketing budget 20X. Like, no. You scale up over time, right? You go, okay, well, let's increase the marketing budget 10%, 20%. Test our hypothesis. Did revenue increase by that percentage or more? Great. Well, then we can go back and continue to scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And be able to continue to get better and better data there as you kind of go through it. In your experience, I know that you've developed a lot of marketing talent, a lot of folks that you've worked with, even in some cases having to, perhaps build out a team. I'm sort of curious, like, what's your approach to developing marketing talent so that, they're not only like hitting performance goals, but that they're also engaged and inspired, right? And where do you see sometimes leaders struggling with retaining top talent?
Yeah, great question. I've heard you guys on the podcast often talk about a stat about what percentage you remind me again, what percentage of workers are unengaged?
Oh my goodness. I would say it's upwards of like 60%. And then they're only about 30% engaged in the work that they're doing. So, right. You're essentially paying 60% of wages to unengaged workers. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And I found that burnout happens when people work hard without knowing if it matters.
Mm-hmm.
And people want to feel like there's a purpose to what we're doing. We're aligned. We've got a goal. We're working towards it. We're getting encouragement along the many milestones along the way to that goal. One example I've thought of before is, Matt, if someone were to ask me, hey, what are you doing this afternoon? And I say, well, I'm going to go get a bucket of baseballs and I'm going to take one out of the bucket and I'm going to set it over here. And then I'm going to take another one. I'm going to set it over here. And then I'm going to take another one and I'm going to set it over. I mean, that's mind-numbingly boring, right? But what if I said, the answer to that question was, oh, well, my son really wants to make his high school varsity baseball team. So this afternoon, I'm going to be feeding him baseballs on a batting tee over and over and over. And he's going to try and take 500 swings today. And I know he's just going to get better and better. And he's going to crush that tryout next week. Same task, just different framing.
Yeah.
And so in that second example, right, I have a purpose, right? That gives me energy, it gives me enthusiasm. So it's about making sure we find that purpose, right? Are we, in the home service industry, maybe are we selling flooring installation, or are we helping people find joy in their homes and being able to share that joy with family and friends who come over? So I think that's just super important to find that purpose and find something to energize people as we move toward that same goal.
Yeah, 100%, right? It definitely lets you be a part of something bigger. Now, this is a great segue into the topic that we love to really discuss as an agency with our customers and even on this podcast, right? So when you really think about the role that marketing has to play in the future of a company, like, how do you feel about the role, again, of purpose and empathy in creating genuine resonance, right? To really create the most intimate connection between, people and company. What role does purpose and empathy have to play?
It's huge because, again, that purpose will drive you to alignment so that you can all work together. And empathy generates trust, right? Where you're not worried about the agenda of somebody else. And, you mentioned COVID times earlier. And I think probably one of my proudest moments as a marketing leader was when we entered the COVID world and really every single agency client we had was freaking out, and understandably, right? This is unknown times. And, for maybe our home service clients, they're being told you can't go in people's homes. Okay, well, what happens to my business? Now, that goes back to that earlier question, right? The emotional impact of fear.
Yeah.
None of us knew what the next few months or years might hold. And if you're a small business owner or you're a franchisee, not knowing, is my business going to survive this? Am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? Am I going to be able to put food on my family's table? Am I going to be able to pay my people? And one of the things I did at that time that I remember thinking, okay, is this the right move? But again, it felt like Stephen Sakash, has that saying, right? When in doubt, do the loving thing.
Right.
And one thing I did at that time was I made a point to reach out individually to every single agency client we had and just ask them, how are you doing? What are you worried about? And, I would say most gave a response of something to the effect of, yeah, I don't know how we survive this. I think we need to really just cut our marketing, because why would we spend money on this if we can't go to people's houses?
Yeah.
And I think the knee-jerk response to that is, well, that's the wrong decision, because that's going to cut you off at the knees, and you're long term, you're not going to be, you're going to cut off your lead pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not addressing their fear, right? That's not addressing that emotion. And instead, what I tried to do was just be honest and say, these are unknown times. And I gave them 3 options. I said, look, we've got 3 options here. Option 1, if you find in a couple weeks or a month, your business is completely dead and you absolutely cannot afford to spend another dime on marketing, you're just absolutely in survival mode, then you should fire us. Save the marketing budget, start more grassroots marketing efforts, but recognize you now need to become the marketer, right? If you want your business to survive, you're going to have to go back and you're going to have to be the marketer. Use that now, your new free time, to get online, talk to people, look for customers other ways to stay alive. And then you could come back to us. Option 2, keep the marketing budget the same or maybe scale back a little. Trust that things are going to pick up. They always do. Stay the course. Maybe you can't visit someone's house right now to do the work, but keep your lead pipeline going. So when you can go back, you're lined up with work. And then there was a third option that I presented to everybody too, was your third option is to lean in, because lots of people are going to back out of advertising. Costs and CPCs are going to go down. This is an opportunity, if you could afford it, to take market share in your area, to trust the pipeline we've built, to increase your budget and know you're investing in tremendous future growth. And I think by giving people those 3 options, again, I'm a big believer in giving people options so that they can make a decision and then buy in, right?
Yeah.
And also by being empathetic and honest and saying, hey, one of your options is to fire us. You build that trust, right? I think we ended up having one client fire us, and then she came back like 3 to 4 months later. And that was really rewarding, just on a personal level, to kind of help walk people through that scary time, and then watch their businesses explode as they kept, even if they were only doing option 2, they ended up with more market share because people did drop out. And we did have a few that kind of leaned in, but they had to, they had a stronger business to start with. They had some budget where they could afford to say, no, we're going to lean in, we're going to take market share. And they did. They absolutely crushed it within a year or so.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are definitely the times to lean in and stay true, stay authentic, right? Not to be something that you're not, and then keep that resonance really going. Well, Josh, that was an amazing show. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights with us today on the Marketing with Purpose podcast. It's a series of the Bliss Business Podcast, and we're so grateful for your time and insights today.
Awesome. No, thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Yep. And to our audience and our followers, I hope today's conversation really sparked some new ideas for how you can align strategy, execution, and purpose in your own work. And if you found this valuable as well in our discussion today, please subscribe, and certainly share this episode with someone that may benefit from it as well, and to really keep the conversation going. And remember, as we like to say, great marketing doesn't just sell, it really serves. All right. So we'll see you on the next episode of the Marketing with Purpose podcast.